branch is always accepted. I'll now recognize myself for a short opening statement. The House Judiciary Committee has, for the last 2 years, gone around the country trying to gain a perspective on the growing crisis. In each location, whether it's Texas, Arizona, all the way up in Ohio, Maine, or here on the border of California, we have sought to find individuals who will understand and who are impacted by it. Today we are pleased to have Mayor John Minto, the City Manager Maureen Best, and the entire City of Santee staff at the hearing. Santee is a border community, as is El Cajon, Chula Vista, and Alpine, and many other cities in and around my district. They know firsthand the impact. We also have representatives of law enforcement, not from the border, but the border doesn't end just at the line between Mexico and the United States. We're pleased to have Undersecretary Sharp, who is from what wouldn't be considered a border district, except in Riverside, we actually have a secondary border crossing that every day deals with people who get past the first border, and that number continues to grow. This hearing has the purpose to highlight the unique challenges we face in San Diego and, as I said, Riverside communities as a result of the unprecedented border crisis which began in 2021 and today has displaced what would otherwise be openings in housing and jobs of more than 14 million Americans. Illegal immigration is something that is used lightly. We're not using it lightly. The fact is that there are, among the millions who have come here illegally, there are people legitimately seeking asylum. There are people who legitimately, more than 1 million a year, who have gone through the process to come to America legally. It is our goal to restore the rule of law and to, in fact, recognize that we can have immigration in our country, we can have prosperity for all, but we can only do so if we can control our borders. Today we will also become acutely aware further of the impact of crime, whether it's the growth of illicit drugs, including fentanyl, or the border crime now that goes back and forth, including the trade in human trafficking. This hearing will tell the truth directly from people who will testify as to their experience of what the difference between the last administration and the policies of the last 3.5 years and how they have influenced them. On day one of the administration halted border security. As a matter of fact, I was a witness 4 years ago to the administration stopping the construction of the last phases of the new border here. And as a result, the border fence was not completed, and even today is not completed, but was not continued as the materials rusted and the world became aware you could just walk into America. We will try to keep decorum here. We will try to make this not partisan, but there's no question at all there's a right direction and a wrong direction, and it's clear we'll hear from the testimony today that we've been going in the wrong directions. Too many stories for too long have not been told. It's the reason we brought people here today, and I want to note that none of our witnesses are in fact political appointees. None of our witnesses here today are per se partisans. We have nonpartisan mayors. We have our district attorney. We have people who, in fact, represent people without a partisan persuasion and, in fact, whose only interest is the welfare of their community and the safety of that community. And with that, With that, I got to the right page. With that, I'm going to extend my warm welcome to everyone in the audience, and thank you for being here. The fact is, being witnesses to our witnesses is just as important, both here and around the world. And with that, I'd like to introduce our panel, distinguished panel of witnesses. The Honorable Michael Hestrin has served as the District Attorney of Riverside County since 2015. Prior to that, he was a line prosecutor in the District Attorney's Office for over 20 years. The Riverside County District Attorney's Office, under his leadership, prosecutes fentanyl dealers aggressively and even charges them with murder if evidence supports such a charge. He has a bachelor's degree from the University of Arizona and a law degree and master's degree in Latin American studies from Stanford. Mayor John Minto is the longtime resident of San Diego area and is the mayor of our host city. As a matter of fact, I'm sitting at his seat. Mayor Minto had 29 years as a San Diego police officer prior to his work. He worked at San Diego Gas and Electric. The mayor was first elected to Santee City Council back in 2002 and has served as mayor for the last 8 years. He serves on the San Diego Association of Governments and the League of California Cities Board of Directors. Mayor John Franklin is the mayor of a city, again, a little further from the border, of City of Vista, of which I was a longtime resident. He was first elected to the Vista City Council in 2014 and has served as mayor since 2022. He is the owner of a family business, worked in the United States House of Representatives for 2 members of Congress. Mayor Franklin holds a bachelor's degree from American University. And I might comment that Mayor Franklin has also been one of the leading innovators in how to deal with homelessness in and around his city, and I think all of us are aware of his work. Undersecretary Don Sharp has served in the Riverside County Sheriff's Office since 1996 after several years in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, which, if I'm correct, that's the largest sheriff's department in the country, and now you have the second largest. He has been a patrol officer, a field training officer, a member of multiple narcotics teams, a sergeant, chief deputy, and has served as undersecretary or undersheriff since 2019. He holds a bachelor's degree in organizational leadership and is a graduate of the Sherman Block Supervisorial Leadership Institute, and we welcome him. Mr. Cory Gautereaux is a founding member of the nonprofit GOAT, GOAT for short, an initiative which aims to combat human trafficking along the Mexican border through comprehensive intelligence gathering and strategic collaboration with local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies. Mr. Gautereaux began his career in the United States Army as a UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter crew chief and door gunner. I might note, the most dangerous position to stand in. He then served as a respiratory therapist before beginning his work with the nonprofit. Lastly, Miss Nicole Cardinale, I'm going to mess this up, I knew I would. Cardinale is a mother, a wife, a Navy veteran, and a resident here of Delusa, California. She currently works in the medical field and is vice president of the Hamul Little League Board of Directors. Her son plays baseball, and I might note she's very valiantly come forward to talk to us today about direct history herself of growing up along the border and of what her child has faced just recently at the border. We welcome all our witnesses for appearing today. We would, under the rules of the committee, begin by asking all of you to rise, raise your right hand to take the oath. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that your testimony you give today will be true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Please be seated. Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. For all of you who may not have testified before, we do limit opening statements to 5 minutes. We then try to limit as much as we can our questions to being questions. However, anything that you have done in the way of a prepared written statement or any additional collateral information you want us to have will be included in the record. So you can summarize or even go off script. The important thing is we want to hear from you, and your entire testimony will be in the record. We will now begin with our district attorney. I'm not sure we've got your mic on. If you've got a green, you're good.
There we go. Thank you. Chairman Issa and distinguished committee members, thank you for coming to San Diego to address important public safety and border security. My name is Mike Hestrin, and I'm the elected district attorney of Riverside County, serving in that role since 2015. Riverside County, located to the east of Los Angeles and north of San Diego County, is not on the U.S.-Mexico border, but is significantly impacted by border issues, particularly drug trafficking and illegal immigration. Due to its proximity to border-adjacent counties, Riverside County is heavily affected by the movement of drugs such as fentanyl. Several major freeways in Riverside County are known as drug trafficking corridors, providing direct routes from the border to Southern California and beyond. Interstate 15 in particular serves as a critical north-south corridor for traffickers moving illicit drugs from the border area through our communities and then further on into the United States. To combat this threat, law enforcement agencies like the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, California Highway Patrol actively monitor these corridors and conduct interdiction operations. For example, on August 20th, U.S. Border Patrol agents from the Newton-Azraq Border Patrol Station confiscated 81 pounds of cocaine during a traffic stop on Interstate 15 in Temecula. The Newton-Azraq Border Patrol Station, located in Murrieta, also in Riverside County, and overseen by the San Diego Sector Patrol, reported seizing 2,437 pounds of cocaine this fiscal year, an increase of 300 pounds from the previous year. Agents also confiscated 3,627 pounds of methamphetamine, 31 pounds of heroin, and 475 pounds of fentanyl. On a national level, the data from the Department of Homeland Security shows that fentanyl seizures have risen dramatically. In fiscal year 2021, U.S. Customs and Border Protection seized over 11,000 pounds of fentanyl, nearly double the amount seized in 2020. And this we're seeing all across Riverside County. Our seizures are going up significantly. Fentanyl smuggling across the U.S.-Mexico border has profoundly impacted Riverside County with significant increases, as I just said, in drug seizures. The state's southern border has become a critical entry point for fentanyl entering the U.S., largely driven by the Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation cartels, which dominate the Mexican states adjacent to California. Although we know the quantity of fentanyl seized, we don't know how much gets passed and how much gets in. But we can only assume that those numbers are incredibly large. The devastating impact of fentanyl on Riverside County is clear. In 2016, the county had only 2 fentanyl-related deaths. Since 2020, these deaths have increased 1,291% just in Riverside County. In collaboration with law enforcement agencies, the District Attorney's Office investigates every fentanyl death as a potential homicide. Beginning in 2021, we were the first District Attorney's Office to file murder charges under the unique circumstances of charging second-degree murder for fentanyl-related death. One such case, People versus Romero, resulted in a conviction of second-degree murder with a sentence of 15 years to life in prison. Despite our efforts, fentanyl remains a pervasive public safety threat in Riverside County. Our office leads the state in these prosecutions, and we're proud to do so. We have more than 30 fentanyl-related homicide charges that we have filed since 2021. However, it is not enough to combat fentanyl locally. After it has already entered our communities and causes the death and destruction of the people that live in Riverside County. Fentanyl production begins in Mexico, where it's manufactured by Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels in covert, unsanitary labs. The cartels are expanding their marketing of fentanyl to children via social media apps. They produce counterfeit pills, and they're lacing all other drugs in Riverside County with fentanyl. In 2021, 4 out of 10 illicit pills, found on our streets contain fentanyl. That number has now risen to 7 out of 10. The Mexican drug cartels recently attempted a public relations campaign by calling for a ban on fentanyl in Mexico, including hanging banners in Sonora and Baja California. However, this is merely a distraction tactic. Ongoing seizures and fentanyl-related deaths show that production and trafficking of fentanyl into our country and into our county has not ceased. It's not diminished. The failure to control the illegal border crossings and address the influx of fentanyl into the U.S. is taking a devastating toll on the people of Riverside County. We urgently need comprehensive and tough federal action and robust initiatives to address this issue effectively. We need stronger border policies, enhanced law enforcement, and other measures that are essential to curbing fentanyl trafficking, which is fueling a crisis across the country and certainly in Riverside County. This fight cannot be waged by local officials alone. We need resources and enforcement at the border to stop this lethal threat before it reaches our communities, before it takes its toll on our people. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Minto.
Good morning, Chairman.
Yep, same thing. And this is your courtroom.
I wanted to see if you were paying attention, sir. Good morning, Chairman and committee members. Welcome to the City of Santee. We appreciate this opportunity for the committee to hear our region's concerns. The Biden-Harris administration approach to border security and immigration has significantly impacted California, with San Diego County at the forefront of these challenges. Between September 2023 and May 2024, San Diego County received between 125,000 and 154,000 street releases of migrants. Many were placed on a trolley and sent and released into East County. These numbers are based on daily reports to the county's Economic Development and Government Affairs Office. These unofficial figures underscore the unprecedented and grave scale of the region's border crisis. The influx of migrants has strained local resources, including overcrowding at local hospitals, prompting San Diego County officials to respond with a coordinated effort involving federal, state, and regional support. In response to the San Diego County Board of Supervisors allocated $6 million in Federal American Rescue Act funding to establish a migrant center processing in San Diego. This center, which operated from October 2023 to February 2024, served as a temporary and stopgap solution to help manage the influx of migrants and mitigate the impact on local communities. During its operation, the center processed over 80,000 individuals, of whom 99% continued their journey to reunite with sponsors throughout the United States. The services provided at the center were critical in facilitating onward travel. They included translation assistance, transportation services, and access to communication tools and Wi-Fi to connect with U.S. sponsors. The temporary center was instrumental in providing much needed support to individuals released by Customs and Border Protection. It helped reduce the number of street releases directly into local communities, alleviating some of the immediate pressure on public safety and community resources. However, the center's closure in February 2024 left San Diego County in dire need of more sustainable, long-term solutions to manage the migrants, underscoring the critical importance of strategic planning and foresight. To address these ongoing crises, our region secured a $19.6 million grant from FEMA to support its response to migrant influx. This funding is in addition to a $19 million already granted to Catholic charities, reflecting the critical need for resources to handle the situation effectively. The funds are being used to establish a migrant transit day center operated by Jewish Family Services. The center will offer essential services to migrants released from the Department of Homeland Security custody. The services will provide and include temporary shelter, legal assistance, travel coordination, and other forms of support to facilitate safe and organized transitions for migrants as they continue their journey in the United States. The situation underscores the urgent need for a comprehensive, long-term strategy with improved coordination between federal, state, and local governments and nonprofit organizations. I hope this emphasis on urgency demonstrates the gravity of the situation. So in conclusion, San Diego County's response to the border crisis highlights the critical role that local governments play in addressing the challenges associated with increased immigration. County supervisors, mayors, and city councils continue to work together in efforts to provide essential services and support migrants, demonstrating a strong commitment to humanitarian assistance and public safety. I want to reassure you that the region is dedicated to moving forward. Our success relies upon continued collaboration and adequate funding. San Diego County remains resilient in the face of these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We now go to Mayor Franklin, and I just want to note, thank you so much for being with us yesterday to see the fentanyl and drug locker. You and the minority leader were very helpful to be in attendance. Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. That was indeed informative and educational to see an entire warehouse full of seizures as part of the regular drug traffic coming across our border. My name is John Franklin. I'm the mayor of the city of Vista in northern San Diego County. Vista is known as the climatic wonderland. It's a beautiful city with middle-class and working-class families. We're also a community made up overwhelmingly of immigrants. 50% of the people in my city are of Latino or Hispanic origin. Nearly a third speak Spanish and 13% speak only Spanish. I believe that America is and must always remain a beacon of hope for immigrants from all around the world. We honor our immigrant heritage and we welcome those who come to our country to contribute to our society. We recognize our obligation to mankind to provide safe harbor for those who are persecuted in their home countries and have legitimate asylum claims. I fully support those who come here lawfully. The United States of America affords more opportunities for lawful immigration than the rest of the nations of the world combined. But we also have a right to expect that the persons in our society abide by our laws. The President is required by the Constitution to take care to faithfully execute the laws. Unfortunately, President Biden and Vice President Harris have decided to ignore our border and immigration laws. And I want to tell you today what the Biden-Harris open border has done to my community. The San Diego County Medical Examiner reported recently 1,203 people died last year of drug overdose. That is double the rate from just a few years ago. Fentanyl is being smuggled across our border by the drug cartels every single day, yet the administration refuses to take decisive action. One of these victims was my own friend's son. He died taking what he thought was Adderall. He bought it from a dealer whose product has certainly killed others. We're also dealing with high rates of crime. Statistics on crimes committed by illegal immigrants in California are not available because, unlike in Texas, California state policymakers refuse to allow our local law enforcement to collect these data. But over 441,000 criminal non-citizens were booked into Texas jails in recent years, including more than 542,000 criminal offenses recorded by non-citizen criminals. Those included 1,000 homicide charges, 69,000 assault charges, 9,700 for burglary, 63,000 for drug charges, 1,200 for kidnapping, 27,000 for theft, $42,000 for obstruction of police activities, $3,000 for robbery, $6,800 for sexual assault, $7,800 for sexual offenses, and $6,600 for weapons charges. The San Diego border sector receives approximately 26% of the traffic that the Texas sector does, so we can extrapolate that tens of thousands of crimes are committed in our community, the same as in Texas, that would not have occurred if we had a secure border. In Vista, I organized an anti-retail theft task force to address the epidemic of shoplifting that we're facing in our community. As we arrested shoplifters, we discovered that these are not people in need. These are people who are part of organized criminal organizations. They're stealing compact valuables that they can easily convert to cash. Several of the stores in my community, including some grocery stores and drugstores, have been forced to close in the last couple of years, creating food deserts in working-class communities. Another impact of the open border. Illegal workers are driving down the wages of American citizens. They take jobs, often, that pay below market rate and work without the protection of our U.S. labor laws. I want to make a point that illegal labor is unfair to our American workers, and it is also unfair to illegal laborers. I've toured our open and porous border numerous times in recent years, and I've watched with puzzlement when the Biden-Harris administration took office as the prefabricated sections of the border fence remained on the ground and rusted and laid to waste after President Biden and Vice President Harris refused to complete the fence, leaving some 37 holes in the San Diego border sector, through which, as you saw in your tour yesterday, people walk through every day by the thousands. I have seen, as you probably saw yesterday, the discarded ladders. And so when we talk about people buying a taller ladder to climb over that fence, I hear that, but I also hear from U.S. Border Patrol agents directly that the wall is a force multiplier, allowing just several agents to patrol a mile of walled border where hundreds are required to patrol a mile of open border. A nation without borders is no nation at all. We must always be a nation that honors our heritage as a land of immigrants, but also one that expects everyone in our society, including newcomers, to abide by our laws equally. I call today on President Biden and Vice President Harris to enforce and uphold our border, to secure our border, and enforce our laws for the safety of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Sheriff Sharp.
Good morning, Honorable Chairman Issa and members of the committee. As Undersheriff of Riverside County, the 4th largest county in the state and 10th largest county by population in the United States, serving more than 2.5 million residents, our agency covers this expansive region with a staff of over 4,100 who are dedicated to serving citizens of the communities with integrity and professionalism. Riverside County neighbors the border counties in California. We are a major artery of highways utilized by cartels and other bad actors to facilitate the trafficking of narcotics and human smuggling to other major cities and criminal hubs across the state and nation. In Riverside County alone, our narcotics investigation unit seized 359 pounds of fentanyl and over 2.3 million fentanyl pills in 2023. This does not cover other multi-agency task forces or other police agencies in the county. This is a staggering statistic of poison seized. What did we miss? We know we missed plenty. The current border crisis sanctioned by this administration has impacted all areas of the country. I spent over 10 years of my career in the assignment of narcotics enforcement. Our communities today are facing an unbelievable flow of fentanyl and fentanyl-laced drugs to suppliers, dealers, and tragically addicted individuals. Our deputies and emergency response personnel respond to dozens of overdoses and overdose fatalities daily. The flood of deadly fentanyl to our streets is overwhelming and only made possible by complete border security failures under the current administration. I frequently must answer questions as to what we in law enforcement are doing to combat this fentanyl epidemic. I have toured the border and spoken to my U.S. Border Patrol partners. They are overwhelmed by the task of dealing with illegal migrants flooding our border. They have had to abandon their normal duties of protecting our borders from criminal smuggling, instead babysitting the flood of unvetted migrants knocking down our doors. I have always known in working narcotics and analyzing cartel actions that the price of drugs go down and the shipments across the border grow larger with weak border protection. When our Border Patrol agents are diverted from their proper duties and the border is wide open, there will always be larger drug and human smuggling loads. The risk of detection and loss of illicit contraband becomes less, and the shrinking risk easily worth the reward of cartels and criminals. When border security is strong and robust, we see smaller loads and more fearful cartels, as they should be when breaking our laws and harming society. The problem must be corrected immediately, including the apprehension of dangerous substances and criminals that have already crossed our open borders. In Riverside County, we are on the forefront of the movement of humans being exploited and victimized in sex and labor trafficking. We often hear on the news of migrants paying thousands of dollars to get passes to the United States. Paying does not mean paid up front. Many are brokered into deals of slavery by means of labor and sex trafficking. The lack of true vetting of the adults bringing a child into our country is horrific. The current administration could be complicit in the delivery of a child into the sex trafficking world. The thought of compassion and humanitarian passage often, not is all what we have delivered as a country. The current administration emboldens the cartels to send misinformation and promises of funding and a better life to potential migrants, and the cartel can now exploit them for their own criminal gain. These policies create victims more often than the humanitarian effort promised. We are fearful of the current open border policies have allowed for many to enter our country with the intent to carry out terrorist acts. Our region is a frequent destination for current and past presidents and government VIPs. Our concerns have grown to the possibility these terrorists may target our region in an effort to disrupt government and U.S. leadership. As a member of the law enforcement community making policy decisions, I am sick of battling the deeply flawed changes being made in by California politicians and the current presidential administration. Drugs, human trafficking, and the unknown number of terrorists and bad actors entering unchecked is eye-opening and terrifying to our citizens. The current administration has lost their understanding of the job of government and public safety. I can only hope and pray the obvious necessary actions needed to protect and strengthen the border are taken seriously and repaired immediately. That our Border Patrol agents are again allowed to do the work they are experts at, and the misguided politics is removed. Weak borders do mean a weak country, one to evade and abuse. I appreciate the opportunity to share my experience and insights as the leader of Riverside County. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Mr. Gautereaux.
Congressman, thank you for prioritizing this critical issue. I'm going to breeze through this because, as my wife and my mom would attest, I have more to say. What has occurred over the past nearly 4 years at the southwest border has led to a crisis that every member of this country should be made aware. What I've seen in terms of the exploitation of migrants by cartels is horrifying, but awareness of the true crisis at the border must be understood. I have firsthand knowledge of how this crisis is destroying lives because for the last year, I have led an operation and most recently a nonprofit organization in the San Diego County area. San Diego County has become ground zero for the unmitigated incursion into the United States by undocumented migrants being smuggled here by cartels. There is a misconception that the over 10 million undocumented people coming across the border in the last 4 years are just looking for a better life. While that is true in many cases, U.S. government policy at the border is facilitating a multi-billion-dollar smuggling operation by the cartels. The cartels are not simply providing transportation for a cost. They are sexually assaulting women and children, and they're taking the lives of people without any fear of retribution. I grew up in this county. My family's here. My business is here. My friends are here behind me. And I'm terrified each and every single day by what is happening with no regard for our safety. For the last year, my team and I personally collected hundreds of discarded passports and driver's licenses. I have some here today. From individuals all over the world. Most of these IDs I find are cruelly destroyed, lit on fire, ripped apart, or folded and buried. There are thousands of these travel documents blowing around the border, and many people behind me have just as much as I do. We deserve security, we deserve honesty from our government. How have cartels been permitted to act with impunity at our California border for so long? Why are immigration laws not being enforced? Why am I finding the identifications of young children and newborns at the border who are being smuggled and trafficked here on a daily basis? Many of these children come here unaccompanied. This is because the cartels have realized that they can profit through the failed federal government's Office of Refugee Resettlement Program. that delivers children to unvetted sponsors that are part of a transnational criminal organization. While on the border, my team located an abandoned cell phone. We accessed the cell phone and discovered it was from someone who traveled from Wuhan, China to San Gabriel, California. I found around 40 different chat groups via an app on the phone that provide instructions on how to get smuggled into the U.S. The most prominent chat groups are Chinese, but my team has infiltrated Russian, Ukrainian, Azerbaijan, and other Middle Eastern chats as well. The chats do not stop. They run 24/7. They contain a treasure trove of intelligence information. This research has led to chats that are associated with a sophisticated network of CCP operatives working in our country. In addition to coordinates to infiltrate the border, I've discovered detailed information on our country's nuclear posture. My team and I have discovered many cases of sexual assault at the border. The cartels are so emboldened that they leave what they call trophies that depicts the sexual exploitation they're responsible for along the route they smuggle migrants. I have seen it firsthand. My research has uncovered that children who speak a different language arrive with parents who speak a different language that they have. My research has also discovered a case where a Guatemalan national with a counterfeit visa sexually assaulted the child of a local Navy SEAL. I have attempted to share content that I found on the border that is a matter of national security. I've been told that due to the political climate, federal agents would be retaliated against for actively investigating this material. Oh, now my stuff's out of order. Again, this is a bipartisan issue. I was told by people a lot smarter than myself to stick to the script, but on my drive here today, I realized that if I stuck to the script, I wouldn't be here. So I'm very confused at things like the DNA program where they would check the DNA of the child and compare it to that of the adult they were with. We're not doing that anymore. The Biden administration did not renew that program. From what I remember, approximately 30% of those children were not related to the people they were coming across with. That's when we were doing the DNA testing. We're no longer doing it. So what's the number now? We have no idea. The people behind me deserve an answer as to why that program it was not reinstated. Tim Tebow sat up here and explained that 20,000 kids were missing. Then Tara Rodas came along and explained that 85,000 children were missing, migrant children were missing in this country. I'm here today to explain that we now have approximately 300,000 plus children missing in this country. That is unacceptable, the greatest country in the world. That's unsat. We need this to be a bipartisan issue. And I know you said this was a bipartisan hearing, Congressman. I don't see any Democrats here.
The chair would note that all members of the committee were invited, and those who were able to make it showed up. But I appreciate your testimony. We'll follow up with questions, and I appreciate your deviating from the script to give us your personal perspective. I think that's extremely important. Mrs. Cardinale, you're recognized.
Thank you for having me here today. I, Nicole Cardinale, am fourth generation on our ranch in Gautereaux, California. Gautereaux is a small rural town on Highway 94 founded in the 1800s. I reside in Gautereaux with my husband, son, and my parents. As previously stated, I'm a Navy veteran currently working in medical administration, and I spend my free time volunteering with my son's Little League and other sports. On Wednesday, August 28th, 2024, a group of migrants traveling through Gautereaux attempted to board the Hamul-Gautereaux Union School District's bus transporting young children. One of these young children was my 8-year-old son, Apollo. The children were both confused that a large group of adults were attempting to ride their bus, as well as completely terrified. Upon the investigation from the school, it was discovered that migrants disrupted another bus route the day prior. The school's immediate safety plan included a police and U.S. border agent escort for the bus. While I'm extremely grateful for the swift planning from the school's administration and the law enforcement escorts, this is a very disruptive way for a child to have to start their day. Apollo and other children did not ride the bus for several days after Wednesday's unpleasant incident out of immense fear that migrants would attempt to board his bus again. Many parents, like me, not only rely on the bus for transportation, but pay a yearly fee for our children to be safely transported to school. That feeling of safety has forever been tarnished for parents as well as the children. A large concern is not all migrants are properly background checked or vetted. How can we be sure that these migrants do not have a criminal record or have ill intent? The children on the bus and the bus driver could have been very seriously injured had these 20 migrants been violent, hostile, or had the motive to enter the bus by force. Living in Dulzura for 24 years, we are not strangers to migrants attempting to use our property to pass through. On many occasions, we have had migrants trespass onto our property to ask us for resources, water, or to offer us money to traffic them to nearby cities. On one horrific occasion, a beloved family horse was released from its corral by migrants crossing through our property. The horse was tragically struck by a vehicle and killed. The sad reality is the bus incident is a small part of a much larger issue. The border crisis has not only become an economic burden to the United States, but it has become a substantial safety concern. It should not take extreme circumstances such as children being injured by administrators to see the problems occurring at the border. The border crisis is detrimental to the well-being of American citizens and our generations to follow. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go in order of seniority, starting with Mr. Biggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here, and thank you to the City of Santee for hosting us, and we appreciate all the folks from the public being here today. And to Mr. Hestrin, bear down, and let's talk for a moment about the state's support. Are they supporting you in your effort? Because you're prosecuting as a county attorney state charges of illegal aliens who come into your county and violate I assume the state law. That's where you're focused, right?
Yes.
And is the state of California supporting that effort?
Not at all.
And how about the federal government?
The federal government has been supportive. The U.S. Attorney for the Central District, Martin Estrada, we collaborate with him, cooperate with him and his office, and they've been supportive. Federal drug trafficking causing death is a 20-year minimum in prison, and we've had several prosecutions. My office actually embeds a deputy district attorney in the U.S. Attorney's office, and that's how we do these prosecutions.
I'm glad to hear that. I hope that you're also able to work with CBP, and I hope that you carry your program out. We have at least two counties in Arizona. I could probably name you more, but Cochise County, Yuma County, doing the same type of thing, prosecuting on state charges. They might not be getting the assistance from our state either. So maybe state to state contact would be helpful. Ms. Cardinale, I just want to question: is the police escort still necessary for the buses that your son has to travel on?
They have now stopped.
They've not stopped.
They have stopped.
They have now stopped the
Yes.
police escorts. And is your son back on the bus?
He is.
Well, we're concerned about that, and we're concerned about the safety of not just your son, but all the kids going back and forth to school in this time. And there's lots of questions to ask all of you, and our time's going to go fast. So I wanted to just point out, Mayor Minto, when you talked about the resource center, you're talking about over a 5-month period. You had 80,000 people go through there, 99% of which were released into the country. But there were between 125 and 154,000 over about a 7-month period that were released into San Diego County. Is that right?
That's correct. And so if you look at it, the math doesn't really add up.
Right.
We had about 80,000 that made it to that center. And if it hadn't been for having that center and the foresight of our county supervisors to actually put that there, all of them would have been released to the streets and had that negative impact on all of our communities.
And part and parcel of that is because there's so many people that are coming through that are being processed by CBP, detention facilities can't hold them. They're releasing them into the street, and we see the same thing in Arizona, by the way. So what happens is it strains your resources, your local resources, and there's not adequate vetting. Some of you have pointed that out. And that's why they're throwing the cards down, because we don't have agreements with many countries on who will actually let us take them back or send them back. So I appreciate your testimony today. Mayor Franklin, we were talking beforehand about these cards that have gone through there, and I appreciate your strong statement because and Sheriff Sharp, because if you don't enforce the law, you cannot get a handle on this very, very serious problem. And I'll just say, Mr. Gautereaux, your testimony is enlightening as well. And I want all of you to know I've read all of your testimony, and I just want to make a few comments here. So to help you understand, so Yuma County is right on the Colorado River between California and here. I was looking this up here. In 2020, the last year that Donald Trump was the president, that administration, we saw a total of 8,774 encounters in that county, in that sector, in the whole Yuma sector, which is a huge sector. It took only, after the Biden team came on, and I should call it the regime, not the team, by February, you'd already seen them get to 5,000 in 1 month. In March, they had 12,000. They had 12,000 in that March. And there has not been, until, you can go until a couple of months ago, there's not ever been a month under the Biden regime that has been lower than the entire year last year. And what was that? So if I can, I'm sorry, I'm going over, I know you're going to gavel me down. He wants to pull the hook on me. I'm hurrying, Mr. Chairman. Here's the deal.
This is the kinder, gentle Darrell. You're just not ready for it.
Yeah, I wasn't used to that. The
gentleman may continue for a time.
Yes, I'll hurry. So you got in Manhattan, 75% of violent crimes now are reported to be committed by illegal aliens. You've seen what happened in Aurora, Colorado. 2 apartment complexes taken over by Tren de Aragua. So they've done it violently. What did the governor say of Colorado? He said, this is all imagination. It's not real. Don't believe what your lying eyes are telling you. It happened in Chicago recently. 32 armed gang members from that Venezuelan violent gang called Tren de Aragua took over an apartment complex. This is it's permeating throughout the country. You're experiencing it here. You're like some of our Arizona counties, which are transit. So these people are coming in and they're going throughout the country. So how do you resolve some of that? I would just say we need to reinstitute Title 42. We need to reinstate MPP. We need to make sure ICE is actually removing the 1.5 million people who have had due process and have removal orders from our courts. This administration won't let them be removed. They need to be removed. We need to find the more than 300,000 children. Now, by the way, when we talk about unaccompanied minors, if you're 17 years old or if you're 25 and tell them you're 17, you'll be treated as an unaccompanied minor. But so you have a wide range there, but we have misplaced. This administration has misplaced over 300,000. You remember what the media did to the previous administration that misplaced a couple thousand. And they found everyone but about 50 of those. I was on the committee that was investigating that. So I can tell you, DNA testing, we stopped that. We can't vet. So if you're throwing down your ID and you are a blank sheet of paper to the CBP, and you can create a whole new legend for yourself. And we need to have our detention facilities and use those, because if you're removing, you're doing hands-on stopping at the border, and you are detaining people rather than releasing them throughout the U.S., you make the country safer, first of all, but you also stop the incentive factor to come over here. And there's so much more to be said about this, Mr. Chairman. I'm grateful that we're holding this hearing, and I thank you for your indulgence. And I have so much more to say on this topic, but I will yield back. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. We now recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chairman Issa. Certainly appreciate Mayor Minto hosting us here today. I made numerous visits to the border since I've been a member of Congress, and you always walk away with a unique experience or something different that makes an impression on you. But everything that I've seen certainly, I think, causes more concern for any of us who find ourselves kind of in a position of either being on Judiciary Committee. I will mention I'm also a member of Financial Services as well, and there is a nexus, believe it or not, between the two committees as we continue to see an infiltration of those that aren't necessarily considered somebody that's just crossing the border for whether it is asylum or even if they say they're here to look for employment or whatever reason they might offer. So this is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger every day that passes. So I represent the far western suburbs of Milwaukee. Still a fairly rural district in Wisconsin, a lot of agricultural related industry in and around there. Still many dairy farms in Wisconsin. And I would say 3 or 4 years ago, we weren't really feeling the impact, I think, certainly not as significant as what we're hearing about today or what I've heard about, whether you're in McAllen, Texas, or if you're in the Tucson sector, which we were a couple months ago, and some of the other border visits that we've done. But I wanted to start with a quick question for the DA. And actually, these are numbers from the U.S. Attorney's Office. In the first 9 months of fiscal year 2022, San Diego and the surrounding area accounted for 60% of all fentanyl seized nationwide. Not my number. Like I said, that's a U.S. Attorney's number. I'm wondering, and based on what we've known before and what we saw yesterday, as the chairman brought up, in the vault, which I've now been able to visit on 2 separate occasions, all the evidence being held related to the Ninth Circuit and the cases that they're prosecuting, managing. This is a great concern, obviously, across the nation. I've got parents that have had children that have died from fentanyl use. Obviously, these stories continue to kind of percolate out there as we hear them, sometimes with a cloud of mystery as to what exactly happened. But District Attorney, can you tell us specifically about what you see related to fentanyl crimes right now?
Yeah, fentanyl is overwhelming Riverside County, just as you mentioned, Congressman. It's pouring in across our southern border, and it's coming through Riverside County. Riverside County is a pass-through to other destinations. Los Angeles is the largest market for illicit drugs, so comes to Riverside County. Many of the drug gangs that use Riverside County as sort of a holding. They'll get homes, fill it up with fentanyl and other drugs, and then ship it out to other parts of the country as the orders come in. They're running a business. The cartels are running a business, and they're essentially using our open border as a business opportunity. The heartbreaking thing, and I'm glad you mentioned it, Congressman, I gave statistics in my opening statement about the number of deaths going up since 2020, 1,200 some percent, and I always hesitate to do that because it sort of clouds the reality. The reality is that these are real people, real families with a son or daughter that's been taken from them by these criminals. And I can't go anywhere in Riverside County without being stopped by a family that wants to talk to me about and tell me the story of their child being taken from them and cut down in the spring of their life. And what's happening, unfortunately, is that the cartels have moved into the counterfeit pill business. And as I mentioned, 70% of the pills, the illegal pills on our streets, contain fentanyl. And so these people are dying. They think they're taking an Adderall. They think they're taking a Percocet. And obviously we don't condone illegally buying Percocet or Adderall on the internet. but they're being killed, and it's murder. To me, it's murder. I think it should be murder all across this country. A criminal who poisons an American with fentanyl belongs in prison. And what we're seeing is just a wave of these deaths. Last year in 2023, we had 554 deaths in Riverside County fentanyl related. As I said, as recently as 2016, we had 2. And if we didn't have Narcan in the hands of every police officer and sheriff's deputy, you could probably add a 0 to those number of deaths. And so this is a tidal wave of death and destruction that's coming across our open southern border. We have to get a handle on this fast. It's wrecking our communities.
Thank you, Mayor Minto. You talked a little bit about, and I would ask the same type of question to Mayor Franklin, because we're seeing in our own communities where there is an absolute depletion of resources related to trying to fight this. And I'm talking about a community in Wisconsin, right? Where there are a number of law enforcement actions related to it. It can be anything from a fender bender in the parking lot, but if you've got an illegal involved in that incident, suddenly it escalates and blooms into a much bigger deal than otherwise it would be. And so specifically for your law enforcement, that portion of your budget, I mean, what kind of constraints and how difficult has that been for you to manage? I'll ask Mayor Minto first and then Mayor Franklin.
I do have to give full disclosure here. We're a contract city with the Sheriff's Department, so we are very fortunate in the fact that we don't always have to come up with extra money out of our budget at our city.
Okay.
And but the question is, what happens at the county level? How much money do they have to come up with? And like I talked a little bit about in my statement, is that if we weren't putting money into these transit centers, then there'd be a lot more money that was needed. When the DA was actually spot on when he said how impacted we are by not having things like Narcan or some of the other types of drugs. Can you imagine how much money we would have saved and been able to put into other resources if we didn't have to buy all that medicine just to keep people alive who took something that they didn't know what they were taking? That's what's really important. And so for us, we're very fortunate. We don't have to come up with a lot of extra money. And I don't know about Mayor Franklin, if he has that same type of experience or not, but the only thing we really come up with more money is to, like, for instance, a lot of these people become homeless on our streets.
Yeah.
So we have to address it from that angle.
Right. Chairman, will you indulge Mayor Franklin?
Of course.
Yep.
So we're also a contract city, but of course we pay $273,000 to the county for each deputy that we employ, and the number we employ is a decision of our council. So we do spend more money on law enforcement than any other budget item. And my city is the single busiest sheriff station in the entire county of the 12 cities that are policed by the sheriff. We have a major issue with availability of jail beds. And one of the biggest problems that we face is that our deputies and police officers in other parts of the county, when they're making arrests, they don't have the capacity in the jail to jail folks. We've made some really, really horrible decisions as a state and some bad decisions in the county. AB 109 that released half of our prison population and put about 25% of that population in our county jails has taken beds and space away. But the whole problem of border crime, and as I talked about in my statement, we know that tens of thousands of these crimes are originated by people who are here unlawfully. Clearly, it's placing a significant burden on all of our law enforcement resources that would not be there if we had a secure border.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll yield back.
Thank you. I recognize the gentleman from Arizona for unanimous consent.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have three articles I'd like to be submitted into the record for by unanimous consent. The first is a piece recently entitled "Illegal Alien MS-13 Gang Member Wanted for Murder Found Living in Texas." Second is Kamala's America, violent Venezuelan mob reportedly beat helpless young man in Dallas parking lot as gunshots are fired. And the third one is from Telemundo. Vinculan con la banda criminal Tren de Aragua al hermano de migrante detenido en Joya por la muerte de una universitaria.
In spite of not knowing what you said, without objection, so ordered.
Thank you.
I'll try to pick up, I'm recognize myself and pick up a few questions that I think will add to what my two colleagues have already asked about. District Attorney Hestrin, you're unique in that you prosecuted the deceptive dissemination of what appeared to be a prescription drug to a young woman, a young girl who died as a result of taking just half of that pill. There's a successful prosecution, but there's no specific state law that empowered you to do that. So as I understand, you had to kind of work around to put together the facts so that you could get that second-degree murder charge. Would it be helpful if both the state, in a perfect world, and the federal government, in what we hope will be a fairly perfect world, were to give you specific charges that would allow you to have manslaughter, second-degree murder, or whatever is appropriate based on the normal knowledge of somebody who knowingly provides a deceptive drug that leads to a mortality?
Yes, Chairman, it would be incredibly helpful, and I do want to point out that this strategy that we've embarked on a couple of years ago, we have filed 36 homicide cases against drug traffickers for murder, second-degree murder. This has now been sort of emulated by DAs across the state of California. So I was proud to lead that effort. But my colleagues across the state, with some exceptions, are also doing the same thing. They don't have the numbers because they haven't been doing it as long, but they are moving in that direction. But yes, we have to use existing second-degree murder law, especially the laws around DUI murders. That's essentially what this is. It's saying that someone who knowingly deals and traffics in fentanyl, knowing the risks, disregarded that risk, and did it anyway, we can proceed under a second-degree murder theory. But it's very difficult. It's legally difficult. It's difficult to collect the evidence. And so we've formed a task force with the Sheriff's Department in our county. We're very blessed to have a Sheriff's Department that works with us like that, and we've been successful. Last thing, we know, because we're listening to criminal organizations on wiretaps, we know it's having an effect. My critics say, oh, that doesn't matter. That's just the old, war on drugs. It's ineffective. It's a bunch of nonsense. The criminals, we hear them saying, we can't go into Riverside County with drugs because they prosecute people there. We're going to go into Los Angeles and do the deal there. I've heard that over and over. Now, I don't wish the people of Los Angeles any ill, but I want them out of my county. And so that makes me happy when I hear that. It's working. We need to do this across California, across this country. It will have an effect.
Thank you. For both of my mayors, both of you represent districts that have high immigrant populations. Mm-hmm. Would it be fair to say that virtually every family that you deal with has some loved one on a list wanting to come to the United States? In other words, almost all of your constituents who are immigrant families also have further relatives that legally they're trying to get to the United States.
Congressman, thank you for that question, because I almost on a monthly basis am talking to families who are generally in tears wanting to get family members here. They've been waiting for years. And to watch people who cross the southern border, to go down and see it in person, who do it without any waiting, without going through any of the lawful process, and then to see the families who do it the right way, who are investing tens of thousands of dollars in attorneys to guide them, the level of unfairness and injustice in that is off the charts. It's wrong, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
Thank you. Thanks for making the case on that, because this is the committee that desperately wants to make sure that our legal immigration system works, which we all know takes longer when you go through the front door, obviously, than it does the back door. Mr. Gautereaux, I'm going to ask you two things, at least. One of them is, will you take time with the committee to allow us to digitize as many of those documents with annotations as possible, so that we, unlike other federal entities, are willing to pursue and to help you get to some satisfaction for all your hard work?
Yes, with the caveat that I like to discuss all that in a closed setting.
Absolutely, and we want to do it in an appropriate way. But you did share with me before we came on something of great concern that I would like to make public here. If I understood correctly, you have a number of documents there that show Afghan nationals who have been given Turkish documentation and then threw them away so that we wouldn't know that what we had were people from a country that in fact destroyed our country on 9/11, people from a country that we cannot and do not have any ability to trace, and by throwing those documents away that they used to get from Turkey to here, they concealed who they were when they turned themselves at the border.
Yes, sir. So we have, my team and I have collected a lot of these documents, and some of the people on my team were able to look into these different documents, albeit passports, ID cards, driver's licenses. I have a credit card from a company that was dropped at the border. It's an Indian company, and the person on the credit card, I decided it was the name of the company on the card, so I decided to Google it. That person has a Dun & Bradstreet number. None of this stuff makes sense, Congressman. We're having a hard time figuring it out, and my team is working tirelessly. I apologize for getting a little emotional in my testimony, but my team is unpaid. They are law enforcement, current, prior, military, and we are trying to figure out what's going on because we're having a hard time, like you said, finding someone or an agency, even all the different task force. I've talked to most of them, and they really don't know what to do with this stuff. It seems, and I may be wrong, it seems like we never were ready for this to happen. I will call it an invasion because of what I've seen, and we don't have a task force to look into a possible invasion of our country. We weren't ready for it.
Well, we're trying to get ready for it, and I appreciate your testimony. Mrs. Cardinale, I want to thank you for your testimony, and it is my hope that we will assert some pressure to see that that those escorts continue, including federal officers. As much as I object to the Border Patrol being asked to be Uber drivers for illegal immigrants, I would rather that they see them at those stopping points, that they take them into custody, even if I sadly know that they'll be released. So we were with the Border Patrol yesterday and Customs. They're very dedicated, and I will personally take time to speak with them to see if we can't free up enough manpower to use that as a technique, not just for your child, but for all the children in the district. So thank you. Sheriff, I have 100 questions for you, but I'm going to follow up on the one I gave the DA. From your decades of experience, if you had a pretty straightforward, we're going to charge you with second-degree murder, we're going to put you away for the rest of your life. If you had that tool when you were apprehending even a low-level pusher, seller, does that give you, the fact that you could charge that, does that give you a lot more oomph to move up the chain to actually apprehend as many of the people involved? In other words, does the ability to prosecute at the highest level give you a tool that usually works well in your experience as a narcotics investigator?
I think over my time in law enforcement, it's obvious that whenever there's any level of accountability by way of holding somebody criminally accountable for their actions, when there's accountability, they want to protect themselves at some level. They may even want to change the way their actions are, and that does give us investigative leads, move up the chain, and as DA Hestrin mentioned, then we are on wiretaps and seeking the people that are really at the core of the problem, the ones that keep the business going.
Well, I will tell you, the three of us up here are convinced that we need to work hard to give you some additional tools, at least at the federal level. I will note that our U.S. attorneys, both in Riverside and San Diego County, have tried hard to do as much as they can with a California that often doesn't make something a crime that should be and that is on a federal level. Do either of the members have a quick follow-up? Mr.
Yes.
Biggs?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I think the thematically, what we've heard today is that if you enforce the laws, you provide the deterrent and take away the incentive to violate the law, which so many are doing. I also want one more unanimous consent, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, tell me it.
It is Kamala's or Kemala's border chaos, San Diego sector out of control, illegals arriving from Jordan, China, and India. And I will just point out that yesterday,
Without objection, it'll be placed in the record in its entirety.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we were on the border, just getting to a gap in the wall, I've been to many times that very gap, and every time there's people coming. There were 5 people coming. We had 2 from Guatemala, 2 from Colombia, and 1 from India. So just in this small group of 5, they told us that they did not know each other. They had met the day before in a hotel in Tijuana with the coyote who arranged for them to get together, drop them off, and that is the norm now across the southern border, and that has got to stop. And we want to help you all, because I know that everybody here is sincerely trying to figure out remedies. And Mr. Chairman, again, thank you for letting me speak.
You're most welcome. Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chairman. Mayor Minto, during your response to the first question, you talked a little bit about the NGOs. Can you tell us kind of what's your overview on, and Mayor Franklin, I'm sure you have an opinion on this too, because we get a mixed message out there, right? And Catholic Charities takes kind of the brunt of the criticism related to the NGOs, but what is your experience right now with the give and take with the NGOs and what they're providing and the resources they're providing?
Well, what I'd like to do first is give you a little background on my experience with non-government organizations. And during the 2000s, I'll say, as I was a police officer, my job was to create programs to keep kids out of trouble, out of the justice system, and we relied heavily on non-government organizations because when you encumber your police officers, your probation officers, they are not doing a job that they can be doing elsewhere. So if you bring them into the fold, the NGOs into the fold, and they are able to perform just basic services especially, then you know what? Then your police officers, your probation officers, and others can actually do the job they were hired for. It's better to find out what the cause is for an issue. We know that kids, for instance, do a lot of things, everything from boredom to being abused. And if you can find out why they're doing that, you can fix the problem. So non-government organizations usually have the resources because they get grants from everywhere you can think of, especially large ones like Jewish Family Services. So why not let them do the work, and then we can take care of the actual line work that needs to be done. I guess that's the best way of doing it. And today, by having them on board, that still is the way that the work can be done best, in my opinion.
Okay, Mayor Franklin.
There are 6,000 people living unsheltered on the streets of our county. 170 of those are living homeless on the streets of my city. Until I've got every single person who's an American off the streets and into a place of shelter, the idea of spending federal or county money to welcome immigrants who have come unlawfully. I visited that center funded by the federal taxpayer through the county of San Diego. They were spending $43,000 a week on transportation services. Now, one of the untold stories that didn't get talked about today, people are paying between $2,000 and $15,000 to the cartels. If they do not pay, many of them are murdered if they try and cross without paying that extortion. They come across oftentimes, as you've seen, in their best new clothes, and they're here to start a new life in the United States. Probably most of them that could afford the $15,000 or whatever they paid probably also had a few $1,000s in their pocket to get where they're going. Now, I don't have a problem with Catholic Charities and other NGOs providing some assistance on a compassionate humanitarian basis, but why the taxpayer would address the needs of people who have entered unlawfully, who seem to have some money, before we would address the needs of those who are living without shelter, who are homeless, defies explanation. So that's my experience.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. In closing, I want to point out for the district attorney, I know he knows this, that Alexandra's Law was introduced last year. It's working through Congress. The intent is, with perhaps even some enhancements, to begin to give you specific laws that would allow the U.S. attorney to join in aggressive prosecution. Hopefully, as we're seeing other states who have looked at it and have introduced it, it would become something that would be both a state and federal tool. Because I do believe strongly that for law enforcement, this type of death through deception has to be attacked in a specific or overt way. Yesterday, we also introduced to the House of Representatives the Sanctuary City Accountability Act. I don't want to make this political, but we live in a sanctuary city area, Los Angeles and San Diego. We live in a sanctuary state. As a result, in many cases, the problems you've all told us about today are exacerbated by the actions. And the federal government is estimated to be spending over $152 billion a year in direct relation to these new and unasked for immigrants. Lastly, one of the things that I've found hardest to understand that I want to make sure is in the record, we are talking today exclusively about people who entered the United States through the Mexican border. Mexico has an immigration policy that requires Afghans, Turks, Chinese, and the list goes on and on. Virtually every country on the planet must have a visa to come into Mexico. U.S. or international law requires if someone is seeking asylum or refugee status that they must do so at the first entry to the next country, which in this case, in every case, was Mexico, if not the first, sometimes the second or third, but certainly we were never the first. Under Mexican law, if someone leaves China and wants to come to the United States via Turkey, they arrive in Turkey, a country which will not admit them without a visa unless they say they're going to the United States but don't have a visa. They then fly to Mexico, where Mexico admits them, although they would not admit them without a visa unless they say they're going to the United States without a visa. They then transit unescorted throughout the process, other than perhaps coyotes, to the Mexican border, completely free to remain in Mexico, but with the knowledge that they're coming to the United States. That is the present state of affairs. Not one person we've described today was lawfully admitted to the United States under international law. Every one of them had been admitted to Mexico in violation of Mexico's law and international agreements, and then presented at the border, where our Border Patrol is required to bring them in. NGOs are paid to help them, and in fact, we give them transit throughout the United States. That is the undeniable situation that I have dealt with since I returned to Congress. It is one that I know must end, and I want to thank all of you for your testimony and helping make the record complete. Next week, the committee will meet in Washington, and I'm assured that we will prepare an interim report summarizing our many hearings, including this one today. As is the policy of the committee, you will have 5 days, all of you, to present additional information, extraneous information, that information we talked about getting, so that we may make the record complete. Again, I want to thank all of you, and I want to thank our audience and those who covered this for the U.S. and international press. And without objection, now this meeting is adjourned.